Aloha and welcome to Kupunaho, that is New Kupuna, a wordplay on Kapunaho. I'm Chris Yano, your host, and this is a talk story podcast by, for, and about us, the Punahou class of '69. It's a privilege to reach this age and realize, hey, we are the kupuna now. What kinds of responsibilities do we take on in this position, and what kind of legacy might we, as kupunaho, offer? Today our guest is Edgy Lee, whose accomplishments have spanned film and television, both nationally as well as here in Hawaii. In high school, we all knew that she was destined for bigger things than these islands could offer. But we couldn't have known exactly how she was going to make her mark, only that she would. And now, as an independent filmmaker and ongoing painter, we have better hindsight on that mark. So welcome to Kupunaho, Edgy.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
I wonder if you could say something about your family upbringing, because when we initially contacted you, you were saying something about you didn't realize how unusual your family was, but could you say something about your family and how they helped make you, you?
My mother and father, I guess for the most part, you would look at our family as any local family. 3 kids, 3 girls. I'm the eldest of 3. My mother had studied voice at Juilliard. My father had studied law at Hastings and seemed normal until I realized that our parents liked to entertain. I'm not just host parties, but like actually had acts, like acts. And they would get up at, I think great request was not that it was forced upon guests, but they loved to see them entertain. Yeah. My mother would do parodies. At one point later in her life, she started teaching voice. So she did parodies of certain students, never named, but just described like the older woman who wants to do Hawaii theater and someday Broadway, or the young girl whose parents are, and she would do this because we're half Chinese, who's Chinese, who should never be singing because you Chinese girls don't have voices. I mean, she was very funny and outrageous. And I hadn't realized that other families weren't used to the kind of raucous humor that we all grew up with at any time. And a mother who was so straightforward and, how should I say, bold in her thoughts, verbal in her thoughts. So it was unusual, and I hadn't realized it until I was really an adult.
Yeah. And you seem to focus on your mother, which is in some ways is natural. I mean, I think the relationship between daughters and mothers is very special. I don't know.
Only because she was so overpowering. My father was a very gentle, kind, and thoughtful, and very, very witty man. So he parried with her. You know, when they would do their act, he'd be accompanying her on piano. He could play anything. He was very talented, but didn't go into music. And she didn't want any of us to go into music because she was in music, and she actually didn't want us to suffer the bane of the musical arts because it was so, she thought, very difficult. So we all went into the arts, oddly, the other end of the visual arts. So my sisters also went into, not film, well, one went into film, the other into television.
But it sounds like the stage or the concept of the stage was even part of your home life.
Definitely. Definitely.
Where were you on that stage of your home life?
I think I was quiet. Like all of us were on the quiet side, not really as showy or needing to be on stage, but I think all of us like to be behind the scenes. I'm not sure, but I do remember as a young girl at family dinners, and we had a lot of them. We have very close-knit, extended family. I would get my sister and my cousins to act out, and I'd direct them in a play that we would make up as we had the family dinner. And, you know, I'd have to ask the surviving aunts and uncles, and there are not many of them left, did they really enjoy it? Or were they just being really nice to us by watching and encouraging us? It was a prerequisite that we all studied certain instruments. So I did violin and piano. My sister did cello, and the other did piano and viola.
Did you ever play together?
No, we're 5 years apart. So when, what we were I think too far apart to be that close enough to play in age at the same level.
Yeah.
But we eventually would perform together. Yeah.
Oh, and called the Lee sisters or something. I'm just making that up.
No, we always thought about that.
Yeah.
Thinking about the 3 Korean girls who remember them?
Yes,
I do. The Kim sisters?
The Kim sisters, right.
But they played horn, which was really great.
Yeah. Now, Edgy, you're a good example of someone who left Hawaii upon graduating from Punahou and then returned in later years at the age of 40. And when you wrote to us, you said you felt, quote, like a stranger in a familiar land. And many of us may have experienced something similar. But can you tell me what that meant for you, a stranger in a familiar land? In other words, why was leaving home important and why was returning to home also important for you?
I think like many young people, especially those of us who grew up in the islands, you imagine what life can be outside of the islands and become curious. Some of us don't ever fulfill that curiosity and others of us never come back home. So I, like many, wanted to know more. I wanted to see more. I had, seen it on television, read about it, looked at movies, but I really was curious. And at first I was just absolutely knocked out by the number of people there were in cities, just sheerly. I mean, I know that you can relate to this.
Yeah.
Just the crowds of people we didn't see here at home growing up. And then, after year after year after year, the clock raced by and 20 years had passed more. And I finally came home to celebrate my youngest sister's wedding and asked myself, why am I leaving? It is so wonderful here. There's such beauty here. There's so much I don't know about the islands that I grew up. And that's what inspired me to start making films about subject matter that I didn't know about. And I didn't think about its success or its popularity of theme. And came to find out that what interested me as a local person coming back home or as a stranger coming back to an unfamiliar land, it might be interesting to other people. And so by living away from home so long, I think I learned the language of how to communicate local sensitivities and descriptions and issues with people who had no idea what Hawaii was about, nor the Hawaiian way of life. So I think that has to do with some of my success at being able to communicate some subjects and with sensitivity to those of us who are local. I saw so much of the opposite. I would go in interviews when I was in front of the camera. I'd go in the interviews and they'd say, "Oh, could you be more or more Chinese in this delivery, or could you be less Asian and more Eurasian?" I thought, what the heck are they talking about? They have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
And it became evident to me. And the more I researched on stories that I had not known growing up, the more I realized how little I knew. So that's how I found myself home again.
Right. Now, when you returned home, what was the reaction of your family? Is this like, oh my gosh, I thought Edgy would never come back kind of thing?
Absolutely. Exactly. Verbatim. And, 'cause when I would come back, I'd come back for maybe 3 days. Yeah. And then I'd go 3 days. And so I see some cousins like that. I see these like barely light here, and then they're off. And I think, yeah, well, give them time. They're going to realize there's something really unique and special about Hawaii and the lifestyle here. So, they didn't expect me to be here, let alone live here. And although I lived out of a suitcase for 2.5 years before I had everything in storage in LA.
Right.
I couldn't quite let go because living in LA is like enduring a torture that after all those years, if you're in the entertainment industry, you think, oh, I can't leave now. Any day now, they're going to either like pick up my script or renew my, any day now. And all these connections I've suffered through for all these years of living in this atmosphere. And that is so true for a lot of people. They just can't let go. But I think more so now that we see the change in urban areas
Right.
and the danger in living in crowded areas these days and all that's going on, I see more and more people leaving the core cities for rural life.
Right. Now, you mentioned suffering.
Mm.
Can you give me a detail of some of that suffering that as you describe your life pre-return?
Well, suffering in not terms of how we see how people suffer under illness and poverty and lack of freedoms. I mean, suffering insofar as if you decide to go into the entertainment industry or the arts, get ready. You know, when I first opened a studio here, when I started to really spend time here and then eventually moved here, I have had at least 20, 23 or so interns, either kids from SC or University of Hawaii, Chaminade, all colleges, all kinds of universities, and some just who had studied on their own, come through my doors. And within a few months, I can tell you who's going to make it or who's not going to make it in this field.
Right.
Because it takes more than just talent. It really takes a driving force and a curiosity. I really underscore curiosity because if you don't have the love for it, I don't think you're going to be able to endure the suffering of taking work that's sporadic. And that, I mean, the simplest way to understand this is you're not going to even a TV station to go and get a job. You're going to be an independent and you're going to get your work based on your creative efforts and those alone. And that is risky. It's a life of risk. So when I first started out, I could have 3, 4, 5 projects in the air, ideas, story ideas, script ideas, and you'd be I'll juggle all of them and maybe one might come through or maybe all might come through at the same time. Then what do you do? So my life has been a constant juggle and you get used to that kind of way of working. So I just talk to, I talked to Vicky this morning. And I said, Vicky, are you retired? She goes, yes, I love being retired. And she said, I'm so glad that Bill Reisner was lucky enough to retire before he passed. He got, I forget how long she said, a few years of retirement or months before he passed. And I thought, I've been thinking of it, but it's such a habit for me to always have something going or an idea strikes me. I go, well, that would make a great film or a great series or just a mural or, community project. I'm getting there. I am getting
towards
there.
retirement.
Yeah. And breaking the habit of always not so much working. I guess the flip side of that suffering is that when you get to a place where your work is joyful and it's just a joy to do, it's not work.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
however, gardening interests me.
Yeah.
The fact not to have to use my brain so much or engage so much, that's kind of interesting to me.
Or also, when I think of gardening, I think something that does not require so much financial outlay or that you have to curry to investors, which is so much part of the entertainment world. Right.
It's nice not to have responsibility to others in that way. And that's the lovely thing about painting or people who are sculptors or, when you are not currying favor or having to fulfill a client's needs.
Right.
Nor an architect's, but that you work solo and you work to please yourself. That's an interesting notion.
Yeah. It seems like one of the through lines, I'm sure there are many through lines, but one of the through lines of your life has been creativity. And I was wondering if you could talk about inspiration or maybe the spark and how that might change over the course of your lifetime.
I think
at 20 versus at 60?
I think it should change. If you're not changing, if you're not feeling change in your own perceptions and way you view life and your habits, then you're doing something, less than your potential. It always has to change. But for everyone, that spark is very different. Some people are motivated by money. Others are not. Others are motivated by social change. Can I affect social change through my work? And if I'm a painter or I'm a filmmaker or if I'm a lighting designer, For some, that's what's important. So for me, I can only speak for me.
Yeah.
I could be in my car driving, and this happens not that rarely. It happens more often than I can think, or at a supermarket or somewhere, and I'll see a scene. I'll see an exchange between a mother and a daughter, or even the shopkeeper and the client, the customer, or somebody just sitting alone at a bus stop. And it'll move me to think of like a story, or just like, oh my gosh, that's so poignant, or that's so wrong, or, any of the above. Those moments I find inspiring, and they come, I never know when they come, but they come. And I think it happens for many people in different ways. You might not be thinking of a painting or a book that you're planning to write. It might just be something else. It might be something entirely different. But I think everybody is inspired by different events or different visuals that they see, but everybody is moved in some way.
Now, I'm assuming that you have not taught, say, in a classroom, but if you have this notion of the spark of creativity, inspiration, how would you sort of have it grow within those around you?
I think of the best teachers I've ever had, not necessarily in a classroom either. People who've asked me back the questions that I had for them. What should I do here? Or how do I solve this problem?
Right.
Or why can't I do this? Or what's stopping me? Ask yourself. So I'd say that the inspiration comes from asking the question of yourself.
Right, right.
And I've seen it. I'll tell you, one of the most inspirational events, I think I told you this, or rather shared it with you earlier, was when you asked me about moments that are memorable or something akin to that.
Right.
And a couple of events came to mind, but one in particular happened here in Hawaii, not long after I moved back. Oh, it was a few years after I had done this film called about a neighborhood that I had grown up near, Papakōlea, Story of Hawaiian Land. And these two little boys knocked on my door. They were really small. Like, I looked up and it was like, oh, no one's there. It was, oh, here they are. They're like 3 feet. And they had big backpacks, 2 local boys. And I was living, had not moved here yet. I was in a ground floor apartment in Makiki. The screen door, I opened the screen door and they said, here's who we are. And we're at Lincoln School, and it's History Month.
Okay.
And of the historical figures that we picked you.
Oh,
I went, that's what I did. I went, oh,
that's
really?
so cute.
And he's like, am I that old? It's like I said, who else? Who are some of the other figures? Betsy Ross. And I thought, oh my God, I'm getting old. So they came in and they took off their shoes and they went to sit on my little sofa and they could barely make it up. I go, hey, take your backpacks. No, it's okay. So they sat at the edge with their feet dangling and their backpacks behind them.
So
and they were really sweaty because they were nervous. Not only was it hot. And they started asking me questions like little reporters. What interested you about this neighborhood? Who did you first meet? How did you get them to tell you the story? What would you like to tell that you didn't tell? I mean, just really great questions.
Yeah.
And then they said, okay, thank you very much. We'll send you a copy of our final interview. And they left. And I thought, that one kid from Vietnam who had only been here for 2 years.
Wow.
And he'd learned English here in the States. I said, that kid, I won't be surprised if someday he's a senator or a bank president or who. That kid was so sharp. The other one was so polite and so typically sweet and local boy. Really a nice kid. They both were very great young people. Anyway, that I will never forget. That a film got me to a place where 2 little strangers from 2 generations below me, right, would even come to me to ask me something.
Yeah.
That to me was so valuable.
And wouldn't they be astonished to hear the story that you've just recounted?
And if anybody hears this and knows them, tell them to call me.
Hooray for Lincoln School, which is where you went, right?
Yes, proudly.
Right. Now, we are all kupuna is our assumption in these podcasts. And as kupuna, what would you like to teach or pass down? What would you like to be your, I don't know if you want to call it as highfalutin as legacy, but what would you like to have kind of teach others?
I don't know if I'm really qualified, but I would say two things simultaneously and together. Be bold and be kind. Have chutzpah, try things, be courageous, but never forget to be kind to people, because those are two important traits to me.
And I would assume that given your experiences, say, in the entertainment business, that those things may be considered contradictory. Perhaps.
I've known some really nice, successful movie stars. They're few. And directors. It's possible. It's just you have to really want to be more than your label, more than your profession, more than the amount of money you got in the bank. You've got to want that. And I think that really is a description of a happier person.
Well, I think that's a great lesson. And you say that you don't know if you have something to teach, but I think that's a huge, huge lesson, especially for those, I think, out there, maybe young people who aspire to something big and bigger and bigger, that at the same time as growing bigger, becoming bigger in terms of your renown, that you want to stay small.
Well, I don't see enough helping hand. Like, I think that here in Hawaii, it's a very we're very kind on the surface. We can be very friendly and very sensitive to others, which we are. But at the same time, highly competitive where we don't need to be.
Right.
Like when I first came back, because I hadn't stayed, I got this sense of, I went, and I started asking. They said, yeah, that can be something that you can be experiencing. Like, you went away and you're going to come back now? You think you're going to know any more than we know that we've gone through, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that, and I saw that with women a lot. I think women should be helping more women with a hand up.
You mean you felt like people were putting you in your place?
Not necessarily me. No. Maybe they were even giving me more grace than other people. But I didn't see enough helping others come up, because when you do that and you make your industry or your profession better by doing so, then you make the industry better by doing so. You improve it. You raise the bar for yourself, the person you're helping, and they in turn with you raise the bar for all of you. So we get better and better and better and better.
Yeah.
I still see too many people imported to do jobs that we could do here. I'm not quite sure why. I mean, it's 2024 already. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, I think with these kinds of words, perhaps we can reaffirm the talent that is here. The need for that talent, maybe to get training, as widespread training as possible, but to have confidence that we have important voices that should be heard. So with that, I really want to thank you, Edgy,
you're welcome,
for sharing, I consider it wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mahalo for listening. This has been Ku Punahou, a talk story podcast by, for, and about us, the Punahou class of 69. I'm your host, Cristiano, with production help from Carlene Tani and Sue Al Doyle. I hope that listening to these interviews might prompt each of us to reflect on those pivotal experiences and insights that make up our own lives, and to share them with families and friends. This is our responsibility, our ongoing legacy. So until next time, ahui ho.